Welcome to Pesticide Forum. This is your unofficial pre-welcome, and you'll get an official welcome a little bit later on this evening. My name's Carolyn Cox. I'm from the Center for Environmental Health in California, and I also am on the Beyond Pesticides board. And what I'm going to do for the next 45 minutes or so is sort of a general presentation about the problems with pesticides. And it's meant to sort of be an introduction to Pesticides 101 so that if you are new to the pesticide issue or maybe have been doing it for a while but haven't thought about all the details, this is kind of meant to give you a quick and easily and hopefully fun introduction to the subject. So thank you all for coming. And this presentation is really meant to be kind of informal and friendly. And I know we're not in an informal and friendly room, but please feel free to ask questions. This is not a lecture, even if it looks like one. So I call this presentation 10 Reasons Not to Use Pesticides. And it's a bit of a gimmick, but tries to convey the important problems that we know exist with pesticides. So this is my reason number one. Pesticides don't solve pest problems. And right about now you're probably thinking, is she like completely crazy? Isn't that why they sell pesticides? And yes, I mean, it's true. Pesticides are definitely marketed as something that solves pest problems. But in fact, that's not the case. What do I mean by that? So pesticides are very good at killing pests. What they're not good at is actually solving the problem. So if you want to solve a pest problem, you basically have to, as one of my favorite pest control operators said, you have to outsmart the pest, be smarter than they are. And you have to think about what is it that's encouraging the pest? What is it that allows it to, not only survive but flourish and cause a problem? And then what can I do to change those conditions? So here's my attempt to prove to you that pesticides don't solve pest problems. So if they really did solve the problem, right, we would use them once and the problem would be gone, right? And we wouldn't have to use them anymore. If you look at the data about how much pesticides are used, there's a little evidence of that. Like, we are using slightly less pesticides than we did in the 1980s, but not much. So for the most part, what happens when you use a pesticide is you kill the pest comes back, you use it again. The pest comes back, you use it again. And you're kind of on, some people call it a treadmill. So, yeah. So, what I would recommend is you look at what are the conditions that's allowing the pests to thrive, and how do we change them? So, like for household pests, it's often a question of sometimes the pests are looking for water or moisture, and so you need to look at things like leaky plumbing and fix that. Sometimes they're things which outside are really no problem, but it's a problem if they come inside, like ants, for example. And so what you want to do with that is just make sure that they can't get in, right? So things like caulking and screens are really important. And I don't mean to say that it's always, this easy, but that's what you always want to be thinking. The perspective you want to have is, what can I do to change the conditions? And the same thing actually applies in farming. Agricultural pests are not that different than household pests in the sense that they have certain conditions that allow them to do well. If we change those conditions, they won't do well. So, for example, you can plant varieties that are well adapted to your particular area, maybe are resistant to certain diseases or whatever. And there's a whole string of things that, that's just one example, that organic farmers and other farmers use so that they don't have to use pesticides. Second thing, and again, this is probably really obvious to all of you, second problem with pesticides is that they make us sick. And overall, this is not a good thing. For me, the important thing is, like, it's really easy for us to say, you know, I got sick from a pesticide application, or I know somebody who got sick, my kid got sick, whatever. But oftentimes, the decision makers aren't going to believe you, right? You need something with authority and credibility to back you up. So what I want to do is give you a few examples of where you can get that. So this is from the Environmental Protection Agency website. And actually, I love this quote, although it looks like we're having a few electronic problems. But this quote is very much sort of technical jargon and needs translation anyway. So, adverse effects of pesticide exposure, bad things that happen when you're exposed to pesticides. They range from mild symptoms like getting dizzy, getting nauseous, to really serious long-term problems like neurological problems. That means your nervous system is affected, developmental and reproductive disorders. So those are things like birth defects, or you're not able to conceive, or those kinds of things. So EPA has this quote on their website where they're talking about pesticides in children. And I just find it really entertaining that they say this and they're sort of acknowledging that pesticides are a problem for children, but yet they're still, approving pesticides and really encouraging their use. So what I did, EPA recently, for the first time in many years, published estimates of what are the widely used pesticides in the United States. And you will probably, most of you, not be surprised to know that the most commonly used pesticide in the U.S. by quite a bit is glyphosate, often known as Roundup. So EPA says there's about 190 million pounds a year of glyphosate used. This is actually an astounding number. I don't know if it seems astounding to you, but total pesticide use, not counting things like the chlorine they use to disinfect our water and wood preservatives, is about 1 million pounds, 1 billion pounds a year. So this is, roughly 1/5 of the pesticides that we use are this particular chemical. And there are, well over 1,000 different pesticides. So, it's kind of amazing. So what I did, just to find a credible source that will tell you that the most commonly used pesticide in the country causes problems for your health, is I went to a database that's sponsored by the National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health. And so this is what it will tell you about glyphosate. One is that's a mutagen. That means it damages your genes. Genes are the things that you pass on to your children if you have children. They're in every cell of your body, and they also tell your body, it's basically the library of all the instructions that tells your body what to do. When your genes are affected, one of the things that can happen is that that your cells go crazy, and that's cancer. NIOSH also says that glyphosate is a reproductive effector. That means it causes problems with our ability to have children. In the case of glyphosate, the effects that they noted were birth defects. The next thing I did was look at, because glyphosate, as you probably all know, is an herbicide. It's meant to kill plants. So I looked at the most commonly used insecticide. So this is something that's meant to kill insects. Chlorpyrifos, probably most people have heard of. You may know that about 10 years ago, EPA decided this chemical was too dangerous for kids, and they actually stopped all uses of chlorpyrifos in sort of residential indoor applications. It is, however, still the most widely used insecticide in agriculture. So there's still a lot of it being used. 11 million pounds per year. That looks pretty puny compared to 190 million pounds for glyphosate, but that's still a lot of a toxic chemical. And again, I went to the National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health to see what do they say about chlorpyrifos. It's actually the same two problems that they identified for glyphosate. So they call it a mutagen. It damages our genes. They also call it a reproductive effector. The way it affects our reproduction is different. What it does is basically if you're pregnant and you're exposed to chlorpyrifos, your unborn baby will also be exposed to it. And what we know is that that can cause developmental problems in the brain of the child, so that they will have behavior problems as they get older. And then the last one, chlorothalonil, is the most commonly used fungicide in the U.S. So it's meant to do in plant diseases, basically. Estimated use is fairly close to chlorpyrifos, about 9 million pounds a year. Again, the NIOSH database identified that it's a mutagen, damages our genes. It's a reproductive effector, so it reduces our fertility. And they also call it a tumorigen because it causes cancer. And anybody who might have been reading sort of nerdy pesticide news today, you know that there's just a new study showing that in addition to this, it also kills frogs. So we have a multi-purpose chemical here. So the third problem I wanted to talk about with pesticides is that they cause special problems for children. And I did kind of mention this a little bit earlier, but I wanted to just go into some of the details because, children are special for many of us. You either have children or have friends who have children, or, of course, you undoubtedly were once a child yourself. So here's what we know about children. They're smaller than adults, but they're growing and they're more active. So what people have figured out is for their size, they drink more water and they eat more food than adults do. So if there's pesticides in the water or in the food, and we're going to talk about that in a few minutes, then they're going to be exposed to more of that than adults. Also, the way they play exposes them to pesticides. So you just imagine a child, say, on a lawn that's just been sprayed with herbicides, and they're going to go out there and they're going to roll around and they're going to, chase the dog, and then they're going to grab something to eat and stuff it in their mouth without eating it, without washing their hands. All those things that kids do. Indoors, they're crawling around on the carpet, they're getting dust on their hands. All of that stuff exposes them to more pesticides. The other problem with children and pesticides is that children, obviously, are growing and developing. So this has a few things that relate to pesticides. One is there are certain very critical times in development when, if you're exposed to the wrong chemical, it can actually make an irreversible change in your development. So kids who are exposed to a pesticide, as I mentioned earlier, they might grow up to have behavior problems because their brain was affected at a particularly important period. Sometimes the changes, the child will outgrow them, but other times they're actually irreversible changes, and it's something that the child will live with for the rest of their life. One other thing that we know about young children is that we all have mechanisms in our body that help us detoxify chemicals. Some people have ones that are really high-powered, and other people, have more of a problem with it. But young children, for the most part, their defensive mechanisms are not developed. So when they are exposed to pesticides, they don't have the tools that we have to deal with the problem. This is reason number 4. Pesticides often contaminate food. I think that probably everybody knows this, but you may not have seen the statistics, which are, to me, sometimes kind of startling. So the U.S. Department of Agriculture has a program called the Pesticide Data Program, and every year they go out to supermarkets and just ordinary places where ordinary people buy food. They buy certain fruits and vegetables, and they bring them back to the lab. And one of the important things is they prepare them the way that a normal person would prepare them to eat. So, for example, if it's an orange, they peel the orange and then test the part that you would actually eat. If it's a banana, they don't test the peel, they test the part that you eat. And basically, this little pie chart shows you what they found. So over half of the fruits and vegetables that they tested were contaminated with more than one pesticide. And roughly a quarter had just one pesticide on them. So only about a quarter of the food that they tested actually was free of pesticide residues. So this is, it's sobering, at least to me, when you think about it. You may not think about it when you're, well, I recommend that you don't think about it when you're eating. But, so here's a couple of examples from the USDA study. They looked at peaches, and they found that 96% of the peaches that they tested had at least one pesticide on them. With potatoes, 90% of them had at least one pesticide. And it's just a real personal way to realize just how dependent our agricultural system is on pesticides, and how badly that needs to be changed. Could you say that again? Right. For many years, the Pesticide Data Program has bought conventional produce. And they're actually, I heard that they're thinking about now adding some organic produce so that people could see clearly what the difference is. One thing about, yeah. I guess one thing I should mention is that there are so many pesticides that even a big study like this being done by the government doesn't test for every single pesticide. So when they say no pesticide residues, it means of the pesticides that they tested for. And they do test. I mean, they do their best to test for as many as they can, and they do test for most of the common ones, I think. But yeah. So I think they use a number of different, criteria to decide. One thing is there are certain lab tests that can pick up not just one pesticide, but a whole family of pesticides. So that's kind of like you get more bang for your buck with those. So, I mean, I think they go through and they look at their testing budget, and they look at the cost of testing, and they look at the number of pesticides that each test will allow them to pick up, and they put together a list. And because they've been doing it for years, at this point it's kind of, not that they don't change the list, but I think it's not like they're starting over brand new every year. And as analytical techniques get better because we have better technology and so forth, then they can find more. Did you have a question back there? Somebody repeat the question because I.
Is the pesticide systemic in the fruit, or is it just on the skin? Wash it off.
Yeah.
Wash it off.
So as I mentioned before, this particular study, they prepare the food as an ordinary person would. So they do wash it and peel the things that ordinary people would peel. So these are the pesticides that are not removed by that kind of. I think there are definitely pesticides that are removed by those kinds of things, but the ones that show up in this study are not.
So then the systemic type of pesticides,
Yeah, I guess you could call them systemic, although they're not all things that we refer to as systemic pesticides. But in any case, they're in the part of the food that you eat. One thing that I think is really important to mention is that, I don't want to be exposed to pesticides, and I don't want any of you to be exposed to pesticides, but because, by volume, most of the pesticides used in this country are used in agriculture, the people that bear the brunt of the exposure are farmers and farm workers, the people that grow our food. Quite a while ago, the GAO, the General Accounting Office, did a report about farm worker poisonings and concluded that there's probably 10 to 20,000 pesticide-related illnesses every year. And even in that report, and ever since then, people have said it's probably a much bigger number than that. Because many, particularly farm worker poisonings, don't get reported. People don't go to the doctor, and they don't want to complain because if they do, they'll lose their job. So this is probably quite a bit of an underestimate. So one of the, to me, really amazing pieces of research that's happened in the last 15 years is called the Agricultural Health Study. So if you think that farmers and farm workers are sort of bearing the brunt of pesticide exposure, they're probably the people who are having the most health problems connected to it. And so there had been a number of efforts in the 80s and early 90s to study farmers. And needless to say, these studies, even when they were done by very credible government scientists, were very controversial. And the pesticide industry did a good job of trying to say, these studies are no good. So a group of federal agencies, the National Cancer Institute and the National Institutes for Environmental Health Sciences and EPA got together and they said, we're going to do a really good study. And this study is amazing. So they started and they asked farmers to volunteer to be in the study. And not just farmers, but the farmers' wives as well. And they're not here in Colorado, but the farmers were in North Carolina and Iowa, and still are. And they have, I think, 89,000 farmers enrolled in the study. And what happens is every year or two, they contact the farmer and they say, they ask them about pesticide use. What did you use on your farm this year? And they ask them about health problems. And they also use, medical records as far as health problems. And what they do is look for links, essentially, between pesticides and certain diseases. And the results that they found, I think, are just amazing. Because the National Cancer Institute was very involved in the study, they've done a lot of looking at cancer and particular pesticides. Because the study's only 15 years old, cancer often takes a really long time to manifest itself. The cancer results are probably not at all complete, but they have started to show relationships between the use of certain pesticides and the occurrence of certain cancers. Also, asthma. I apologize for that electronic problems here. And some things that you might not have even thought of. Diabetes, for example, was associated with use of certain pesticides. Depression, heart attacks, and just other just amazing collection of health impacts. And as far as I'm concerned, this is like the best study that's ever been done and is continuing to be done of the health impacts of pesticides. The next thing I wanted to talk about was, so because they have 89,000 farmers, they have some that use pesticides and some that don't. And in particular, for any given pesticide, if they're looking at a particular pesticide and its relationship to a disease, there'll be people, who didn't use that pesticide and people who did. Yeah, so typically, in almost every single one of the studies, they'll have one group of people that's the never used whatever it was. So the next thing I wanted to talk about was pesticides and pets. I know pets are very important to lots of us. One recent problem that has come up that I found particularly compelling was these spot-on flea treatments. So these are pesticides that are designed to be used on pets and theoretically are tested to make sure that they're okay for pets. And I think it was in 2008 or 2009, EPA realized that they were getting a lot of reports of people who said that their pet got sick from the use of these different products. So they actually convened a panel of experts to go through all the reports and everything. And it was kind of amazing what they found. So they found vomiting, diarrhea, hair loss, skin ulcers, lethargy, seizures, and they even said for every product that they looked at, they found examples of death caused by use of the product. So to me, this is just amazing because these are products that are designed for use on these pets. And here they are, making not every animal sick, obviously, but some pets get sick from them. And the expert panel was actually able to figure out not anything very cosmic, but like, for example, small dogs are a lot more likely to get sick from a spot-on flea treatment than a big dog. And this makes sense because they're smaller, and so they're apt to be get a larger exposure relative to their size than the dog. Unfortunately, I wish EPA had taken stronger action. They put some different language on the label and stuff, and they say they hope that it's going to take care of the problem. But my guess is we're going to be hearing more about this in years to come. Yeah? Right. I have one other study about pets and pesticides that is done a while back in 2004, but I still find it incredibly compelling. So just a reminder that pets in a certain way are like children in the way that they might play on a lawn. So in the same way that a kid, would roll around or slide or whatever, dogs are, they're rolling around on the lawn, they're lying on it and doing things that, we probably wouldn't do. So there were some veterinarians who looked at Scottish Terriers, and I was not aware of this before. I'm not really a dog person, but Scottish Terriers are known to be particularly susceptible to bladder cancer. So these veterinarians looked at bladder cancer in these terriers and then asked the terriers' owners, did you use a lawn care service or did you use pesticides on your lawn? And what they found is that the terriers who lived in homes where there were these lawn care products used were 4 times as likely to get bladder cancer as terriers who lived in a home where there were no lawn care chemicals used. I find this scary for 2 reasons. One is because I don't want dogs to get cancer, but it kind of makes you think about, well, if it's doing this to a dog, what are they doing to us, and what are they doing to our kids? Okay, water and air. There have been some amazing studies recently about pesticides in water. The U.S. Department of Agriculture and their pesticide data program actually tests water in addition to the fruits and vegetables I mentioned earlier, and they found 57 different pesticides in their drinking water sample. I find this kind of scary. Another really comprehensive study was done by the U.S. Geological Survey, and it started in the late 80s or early 90s, and it finished up probably 7 years ago or so, but they sampled streams all over the country. And basically what they found is that almost every time they tested a stream for pesticides, they found them. It's just the stuff is everywhere. Yeah. So this particular, when the U.S. Department of Agriculture, I guess because they're agricultural? I don't know. Anyway, they concentrated on drinking water in towns that got their water from a river and a river in an agricultural area. So this doesn't really answer your question about what's in well water, but this study, like I just put the results about streams, but they also have some really good results about what's in groundwater. In other words, what's in wells. So definitely take a look. It's called the National Water Quality Assessment, NAQUA. And it's just an amazing study. And I think it's been budgeted out of existence, which is really a shame. And I don't know how close to your town they would have tested, but if you contact, are you in Denver or?
No, we're in Connecticut.
Connecticut. Okay. If you contact the USGS office that's near you, I think, and they also have all the results on their website as well. Okay, so I wanted to talk briefly about fish and birds because they're also very susceptible to pesticides. And I did the same thing that I did for human health. I just took those really commonly used pesticides. So glyphosate, the number one, EPA, and these are quotes from EPA, but EPA doesn't think that glyphosate itself is really a problem for fish, but the inert ingredients in the Roundup, some Roundup formulations, are very toxic to fish. For chlorpyrifos, this is what they said, and it's kind of nerdy, but just using chlorpyrifos once poses risks to not just birds and fish, but small mammals and aquatic invertebrates, which means the little critters that lives in the streams, for nearly all registered outdoor uses. That's a very strong statement for EPA to make. And then if you have more than one application, that just makes it worse. For chlorthalonil, they said they've seen effects on birds and their ability to reproduce at 5 parts per billion, which is actually a very, very small amount of chlorpyrifos. And then it's also very highly toxic to fish. And you had a question, right? Could someone repeat the question? Chlorpyrifos, that has been an issue because it does sort of last in your body for a while. I don't think it would be an issue for glyphosate or chlorthalonil. Yeah, actually, in general, and Roundup is not really an exception. Basically, every different pesticide product, I shouldn't say every, but almost all pesticide products have different inert ingredients. And so even when the different things that are called Roundup can actually have quite different ingredients. And by law, every pesticide has something called a EPA registration number. And so if you see two things that have different names, but you look for the registration number and it's the same, that means that what's in the product is the same. But things with different registration numbers are different, basically. Yeah. Right. We're going to get to inert ingredients in a minute. But yeah, the term is very, very misleading. Yes. Yeah. So the interesting thing with rodeo is that, so when EPA complained about the inert ingredients in Roundup, Monsanto said, okay, fine, we'll make a glyphosate product that doesn't have anything in it except water. And that's what they call rodeo. But the thing is, they tell you to add something before you spray it. So it's, it sort of got Monsanto off the hook, but it doesn't get the fish off the hook. So, okay, and I just wanted to briefly mention Rachel Carson. You can't talk about pesticides in birds without talking about Rachel Carson. She, I think, is an inspiration to all of us, and we wouldn't be where we were in terms of pesticides without what she did. Okay, if you start getting concerned about pesticide use, one of the things that often comes up is you'll hear someone say, but all the pesticides we use are approved by the government, right? They couldn't possibly hurt you. So, and it kind of makes it sound like the government is actually testing pesticides and making sure they're okay. But just to set the record straight, the government basically does not test pesticides. Very rarely they do some work, but for the most part not. So the question is, who does the testing? Well, it's these companies that profit from the sale of pesticides are the ones who test the pesticides. And I think, we don't need to belabor the obvious problems that this causes, but I'll just say, if you were in a business that was making money by selling a pesticide, would you do tests that showed it had a problem? I mean, it's not. Yeah. Right. I couldn't fit them all on the list. I'm sorry. Yeah. Right. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't go so far as to say it would be easy, but I agree with you that it could be done. Yeah. Yeah, so actually FIFRA says that health and safety data shouldn't be confidential, but in fact, EPA is pretty reluctant to release it, and you actually have to jump through a whole bunch of hoops, and it generally, in my experience, takes many years to get a hold of the actual data. I want to finish up here because we're running out of time. So here's my last reason not to use pesticides. Pesticides have too many secrets, and if you think about it, there are a lot of them. If you walk into a store, you're going to buy an apple, and you want to know, well, what pesticides are on that apple? Well, you don't know. If you want to know what pesticides are used on your block or used at your kid's school or whatever, usually you can't get answers to those questions, right? But there's one secret about pesticides that I think is more important than all the rest and is actually one of my pet projects, and it was mentioned earlier. It's the so-called inert ingredients in pesticides, which are not inert in the sense that they're inactive or benign. They're just called inert because that's a legal term. And the important thing about them, well, there's several important things. One is they're not included in most of the health and safety testing that manufacturers do of pesticides. And second of all, they're not on the pesticide label, and it's very, very hard to actually get information short of sending the product to the lab and having them figure it out. So this is something that's really got to change, because when you're exposed to a pesticide, you're not just exposed to whatever the active ingredient is, glyphosate or something. You're exposed to this whole combination of chemicals that includes the inert ingredients. And so with no information about that, it's really hard for us to know what's making us sick, what's the problem. But, it's like we can't get past square one because of this huge loophole that pesticide manufacturers have exploited. And about a year and a half ago, EPA, after honestly 20 years of being badgered by people like us, they said they were going to look at options for doing something about this. They haven't actually done that yet, but we're hoping to make them sometime soon. Okay, so thanks for listening to me. We do have a little bit of time for questions, and before I did that, I wanted to, a couple things. One is my email address is on the slide here, and you're welcome to email me if you have questions that you don't get a chance to ask me in person. And then the other thing is that, I've just gone through all these problems, and I think it's really important to end on some good news. So I'm hoping that you will help me, and that people will be willing to just say what good things about reducing pesticide use or promoting alternatives have happened, in your family, in your town, in your state, whatever, recently. And I'll just start with a couple examples. Just on the very personal level, I have been on airplanes way too much lately, and I was on an Alaska airline flight, and when they passed around the snack, it was crackers or potato chips or something, but they were organic. I thought, what? Something has changed when you get on the airplane and the airplane snack is organic. That's just so exciting. And then, sort of on the other end of the spectrum, just say that I'm from California. For the last couple of years, people in California have been working really hard to stop or keep a really nasty pesticide called methyl iodide from being approved for use in California. And it's been a long, hard struggle. It has actually been approved, but it still hasn't been used. So we're still hoping that we can stop this nasty chemical. So who else has some good news? Anybody else have some good news that they're willing to share? No good.
If anyone has anything. If anyone has any questions, we can use the mic.
The one thing that we've done with the people who have bees in their house, and we explain to them about Roundup and what it does and how it hurts the bees too, because it does. We also give them the option, because you can't just say don't use this. So we've been doing a lot of research, and your 4% vinegar with 1 teaspoon of salt per gallon is more effective than Roundup. It's 4% vinegar, or just regular white vinegar, with 1 teaspoon of salt per gallon. And it will kill everything that you put on it, grass and all.
Does it keep it dead for a while? Does the salt?
You will need 3 to 4 applications per summer. Yeah. No, 4% is not what you buy in the store. You have to get it somewhere else. The stuff you buy at Sam's or Costco is like 1 or 2%. But you can just leave it out and let it evaporate, and then it becomes 4%. Just spray like you do Roundup.
How much vinegar per gallon? Is it like 2 tablespoons or?
But no, it's a gallon of vinegar. Okay, and 1 teaspoon of salt, and it'll kill anything. And it doesn't have these issues, It's rotten apples. It's rotten apples. That's what it is. Just weeds. Just
good news that they are willing to share.
Just weeds. Yeah. It's not for bees. You don't put it on bees. It's not for ants. It's just for weeds. You just get it, leave it out, and let it evaporate so it's 4%. You're just Sam's Club. You know what I'm talking about.
What's up with Ottawa?
You want to pass the mic back?
Hey, did Ottawa ban pesticides? Why can't we? Didn't
Say that again. Sorry.
Ottawa in Canada banned pesticides?
Yeah. Well, I have some things to say about that. But I don't want to say them right now.
Oh,
so,
it's not good?
But yeah, using an unregistered pesticide is illegal, and I can't stand up here and tell you that it's a good idea or something that you should do.
Oh, him. Okay. Yeah. All right.
Can you pass the mic?
I sure can.
I come from the Association of Farm Worker Opportunity Programs in D.C., and we just finished a 10-month investigation, literature review, and focus groups about pesticide health effects on children of farm workers. And if you want a copy, you can sign up at a desk over there. And I think it was a really amazing experience. I think it was empowering for the farm workers that we did focus groups with. We do a lot of health education about the effects as well. So I think that's a really good step forward for our organization and hopefully for the farm workers that were part of our focus groups as well. So if you're interested in that, come see us.
I think that there's food out there, and we should take advantage of it. So, and I'll just say, I'm going to be here all weekend, and if you do have questions, just come up to me and ask me, because I'm happy to answer or try to answer whatever questions you have. Does anybody have a question that they just need to ask right now before we break up?
No. I didn't have a question. I was going to share a story, but it's sort of a long one. So if somebody has a burning question, that might be better. Okay, I'll try to make it short. I'm Carol Kwiatkowski from TEDx, the Endocrine Disruption Exchange. And, well, thank you. We're in Paonia, Colorado, about 4 hours on the western slope. And for the last 25 years, we've been sprayed every week with pesticides in the summer for the mosquitoes. They use malathion, they use permethrin, they've used possibly a mixture, who knows. And about 2 years ago, we did a huge campaign to change the board that was on for the special district that was doing the spraying. And we got rid of all the old board and we brought in a whole new board, and we've been doing the larviciding, and they haven't sprayed in 2 years, and it's been wonderful. And yeah, it's all good.
Other two pesticides, I don't know what they are.
Brand names. What are the brand names?
What are the brand names that go with them?
Chlorpyrifos, like I said, is not sold for homeowner, household, or institutional use anymore. It's just agriculture. But I think the most common brand name in agriculture is Dursban, but it's such a common pesticide that there's a bunch of them. And chlorthalonil, there are homeowner products that you can buy. One brand name is Daconil, and Bravo is another brand name, but there's a lot of different brand names. Again, with these old, really widely used pesticides, there are lots and lots of brand names, and the thing I can recommend the most is that you read that fine print on the label that says, what it is. Yeah, Angela?
And wood preservatives, we use over 1 billion pounds of pesticides per year, which is about 3 pounds per person per year. Does that include the disinfectants and the triclosan that's in all the homeowner and hospital?
It doesn't include triclosan that's used in soaps and hand washes and stuff, because that's not a pesticidal use of triclosan by some, weird government agreement. Those are FDA, uses, not pesticide uses. But so if you add up the wood preservatives and the chlorine that's used in swimming pools and drinking water systems and the rest of the pesticide use, it actually adds up to about 5 billion pounds a year.
I don't mean to disagree with the fellow who said something about the vinegar and salt at all, because they do work. I just want to point out to those of you who live here in Colorado that we don't have enough rain coming out of the sky to flush that salt out of your soil. So please be very, very careful when you use it.
When you had that chlorinated hydrocarbon pesticide up on the board there and it had 5 ppb, it reminded me about 20 years ago we did some chlordane assessment. Chlordane lasts forever. It's put in people's homes all around the world. The United States Air Force had done a study from complaints of chlordane sprayed barracks, I believe it was on Air Force bases in Germany. And this would go back probably to the beginning of chlordane use. They found that the complaints didn't go away until they lowered the level of ambient chlordane in the built environments that they owned and managed to less than 5 ppb. This is years and years after they sprayed the stuff. We've done a little bit of that. We don't get many calls here in Colorado for chlordane, and we have seen the same or similar kinds of things. Chlordane, unlike a lot of pesticides, is relatively easy to remediate. In fact, you can probably do it yourself. If anybody's interested in that, they can talk to me. Thank you.
So are you guys hungry? I mean, anybody who wants to leave should feel free to leave, and if you want to stay and ask questions, you should do that. I don't want to hold up the works. Thank you all so much for coming.